Hi, greetings, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this press conference on the Ban Conflicted Trading Act. This poses a fundamental question. Are we here to serve the public, or are we here to serve our portfolios? And the answer in this bill is we're here to serve the public. Going back to 2012, Senator Brown and I put forward an amendment that said, while we're considering the Stock Act, we should realize we're not really solving the fundamental problem of the conflict of interest. When legislators are trading in individual stocks while they are writing policy, their mind might be on their stocks rather than on policy. And we've had scandal after scandal that has illuminated that issue, including the situation with former Congressman Price, who was engaged in healthcare stock trading while he was writing healthcare policy. It's wrong for us to have that conflict of interest resident here in the House and Senate as we do our work for America. So this bill takes on two fundamental issues. One, it says we will be focused on the issue of public service, not service to our portfolio, and eliminate that conflict of interest. And the second is, it says this assures the public that we are not benefiting from insider information. Now, I know folks may say, well, didn't the Stock Act solve that? But it didn't, because, well, demonstrating that someone is trading on insider information is very difficult to show. But the fact that trades are occurring in proximity to policy being made suggests to the public that maybe we're not really focused on making the best possible outcome for our constituents and for America. And that's what we want the public to know, that we are here to serve them. And so this reform is long overdue. I really appreciate the partners in the House that spearheaded this from the beginning, Representative Krishnamoorthi, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, and my colleague here, Senator Brown, who's been with me in this conversation now for 11 years, and the other senators who have signed onto the bill, and those who have started to work to create their own, various versions of this effort. We're going to have to bring all that together because this is the moment we need to get it done. We don't need to just discuss it. We need to get it passed through the House. We need to get it passed through the Senate. And we're building the momentum to make that happen. So thank you for joining us and paying attention to this very important reform. And I'm going to pass this over to Representative Krishnamoorthi.
Thank you so much, Senator Merkley. Thank you, Senator Brown. I want to thank my band of three musketeers in the House, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and Congressman Neguse, who've been leading the charge there. And I want to thank all of you for paying attention to this very important issue. You know, today, only 24% of Americans trust the federal government to do the right thing, 24%. And the main reason there's such huge distrust in the federal government is because people think that we are engaging routinely in conflicts of interest where we put our own personal interests above the public interest. One of the primary fears about conflicts of interest is that we routinely engage in conflicted stock trading. That is where we, as members of Congress, trade stocks, buy and sell stocks, even at the same time that we have access to non-public information that we glean from classified briefings, hearings, and insight into legislation, all of which can affect the price of stocks. And so today, we're here to talk about solving this particular conflict of interest in passing the Banning Conflicted Trading Act. The BCTA is the primary vehicle in Congress right now that can finally restore public trust and make sure that we start to build a little more confidence in the public that we're out to do the right thing for them and not our stock portfolios. As you know, Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Schumer have come out in support of barring members of Congress from trading individual stocks. Our bipartisan, bicameral bill presents an ideal vehicle for preventing senators, representatives, and their top staffers from putting their private interests ahead of the public interest. Ending this practice will lead to more honest governance by eliminating the risk of members of Congress making trades based on their positions. Additionally, it will eliminate the risk of making policy based on their trading plans. We've discussed this bill with congressional leadership, and I also want to highlight the tremendous public support for our initiatives. Recent polling found that almost 70% of voters support banning members from owning stock in individual companies. And I should just add that that represents the vast majority of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. More than 60% of voters rarely agree on anything. So that's really an accomplishment to have such a huge percentage of the public supporting this particular initiative. Today, I just want to say we have to get progress on passing the Banning Conflicted Trading Act ASAP. We want to make sure that this particular bill doesn't get bottled up in committee, that it actually comes to the floor for a vote, and that we finally can get a reform that the public desperately demands. With that, I'd like to introduce Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez for her remarks.
Thank you so much, Representative Krishnamoorthi. And I mean, really, Senator Merkley and you have said it all. This issue is easy to understand. The vast majority of voters know that it's the right thing that needs to be done. I would argue that many members know that it's the right thing to be done. And it's pretty simple. We are here because we are guardians and stewards of the public trust. And we use that public trust in order to legislate and see and anticipate what are the issues that our country may be facing, and use that information and that knowledge to legislate for the public good. When we get caught up and have even the ability to individually trade stock, it erodes public trust in government. And right now, whether it is media, government, or any sort of institution, we're having a crisis of public faith in many institutions that are very critical to the well-being of society. And not only on that broader issue, but really just in a basic issue, when we have access to classified information, we should not be trading on that information, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. We shouldn't appear to or we shouldn't really even advance the appearance of that. And so it's incredibly important that we ban the ability for members of Congress to direct trades in individual stock. And we want to make sure that we do that without loopholes, without exceptions, and that it's pretty straightforward and cut and dry. And, you know, I think that's really the fact of the matter. We have overwhelming public support for this. It's been a very long road, and I want to come a bit before then, because it's not easy. I know Representatives Neguse and I have been honored to be on your side in this uphill battle, Representative Krishnamoorthi, but it's not easy to have an institution block itself from practices that it can currently be engaged in. And because of the public's rallying around this issue, because of the public's attention and engagement on this issue, the people at home watching have made it too difficult to ignore. And I really think that that's why we're at the moment that we're at. And the critical juncture is to make sure that we just stick the landing without any funny business. And that's really where we're at. And we're so excited. I'm very excited as well. And with that, I hand it off to Representative Neguse.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Ocasio-Cortez and Representative Krishnamoorthi. I mean, I couldn't be more proud to work with my two colleagues here in the House, and of course, with the leadership of Senator Merkley and Senator Brown. And Representative Ocasio-Cortez always speaks truth to power. So she's willing to say something that is certainly true, which is that this has been a long road. I mean, when this bill was first introduced, over a year ago, in the House. And of course, Senator Merkley has been working on this for many years. It was not a particularly popular proposition, but over the course of the last several months, more and more, I think, of our colleagues in the American public have realized and have come to the same conclusion that we have, which is that to really restore our faith in government, this is a common sense step that can ultimately achieve the same. And so I'm grateful to Raja, to Alex, to Senator Brown and Senator Merkley for their strong leadership and for building this coalition that is now on the precipice of finally getting this done. Look, members of Congress should be banned from trading stocks, period. Members of Congress should be working in the interests of the American people, not in the interests of their personal stock portfolios, as Raja said. And in the communities that I represent, Coloradans are already facing challenging economic circumstances in the wake of the pandemic and should be able to trust that representatives in Washington are putting their needs first. We all took an oath when we were sworn in to defend the Constitution, and we promised to represent our communities to the best of our ability. And banning members from trading stocks, I think, is a simple, common sense measure that we have to take to ensure transparency and to restore the American people's their trust in good governance. I'm not going to go through all the myriad ways in which members of Congress under the existing system can engage in behavior that I think the American public would find problematic and in some cases illegal, as Senator Merkley already described. Clearly, members of Congress have access to information that the general public does not have, participating in committee hearings and discussing policy that could ultimately impact the bottom line of some publicly traded companies. And so it's why our bill, the Ban Conflicting Trading Act, is so important, because it would prohibit members of Congress and other congressional staff, senior congressional staff, from abusing their positions for personal financial gain. And something that we haven't talked as much about, but it's worth underscoring, this bill from Senator Merkley and Raja and my colleagues here also would ensure that folks aren't serving on corporate boards, which I think most Americans already believe that that's the case. They assume under existing law that, how problematic it could possibly be for a member of Congress to serve on a corporate board. And yet that happens frequently. So this bill would ensure an end to that practice, among others. It's time to get this done. We are committed to doing everything we can. We're grateful to the House Administration Committee and to the chairwoman, as well as the chairman of the Rules Committee, for their assistance and their help as we move down this path. And we're looking forward to getting this across the finish line. But again, it is because of the tireless work by the champions on today's press call, which includes, of course, someone who is perhaps the working class and working families' best partner and best advocate in the United States Senate. And that is the chairman of the Banking Committee, the senior senator from the great state of Ohio, Senator Brown.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Joe, and Raja and Alexandra. Thank you, and my friend Jeff Merkley. Thanks for this. This is really simple, as Alexandra said. It's public officials should serve the American people, not their stock portfolios. It's a principle I've always lived by. I don't own individual stock. I don't think members of Congress should, any more than, as Joe said, that they should serve on corporate boards. It's why I teamed up with Jeff Merkley. Unfortunately, it's been almost a decade ago, on an amendment that lost decisively, frankly. Teamed up with them on an amendment of prohibiting members from trading stocks back in 2012. It was the right thing to do then. It's the right thing to do now. Elected officials, we know, have access to all kinds of non-public information that can affect individual companies and even entire industries. We vote on issues from workplace safety to the environment to wages to all kinds of regulatory issues that affect companies, and we shouldn't be owning their stock, and members of Congress shouldn't be using information that they should use to serve their constituents, not to get rich. Americans have watched for years as too many members of Congress have given handout after handout to the wealthy and to the biggest corporations in the country. People already assume that members are in these jobs to serve themselves and not their rich donors and not American workers. That's what's undermined the faith in our government more than anything. Unfortunately, too often, that's a pretty correct assumption, that that's what members are doing. And too many leaders in Congress and our economy and the largest companies all think the stock market is in fact the economy, and they act like that. We know that corporations don't drive the economy, workers do. We're finally seeing a president who's putting workers at the center of the economy, at the center of government, who is not afraid to use the word union and the advantage that carrying a union card means in terms of wages and benefits, in terms of workplace schedule, all the things that unionization matters, showing that how unionization matters. We need leaders who understand that and who will center the vast majority of Americans who get their income from a paycheck, not an investment portfolio. If we want a government that's on the side of workers, that will create jobs and raise wages and bring down prices and lower the cost of housing and prescription drugs and childcare, then we need strong rules to make sure that no one is abusing his position or her position for personal gain. People need to be able to have confidence that policymakers are making decisions based on what's best for the country, not what's best for their own bottom lines. It really is as simple as that. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much, Senator Brown. We are now going to move to the Q&A section of the press call. Members of the media, please drop your name and outlet into the Q&A box, and we will then unmute you so you can ask your question directly. Okay, Brian Metziger with Insider. My colleague Daniel will unmute you shortly, and you can ask your question.
Hi there, can you all hear me?
We can.
Sounds good. Thank you all so much for doing this. I wanted to ask you just a couple of questions if I could. The first is about spouses, and Senator Merkley had a chance to talk with you yesterday about this as well. You know, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you said you wanted a bill that does not include, you know, loopholes or exceptions. Ethics experts and other senators alike have identified the exclusion of spouses from a stock trading ban as a potentially dangerous loophole in the ban. Why does your bill not currently include spouses? And will you support a final proposal that does? And then just the second question is, given that we have kind of both members of the House and the Senate here, I'm curious what you all think, given the different processes unfolding on either side of the Capitol. You know, who are you expecting, which chamber will act first on this? Thanks.
Yes, no, thank you so much for the question. I personally am deeply supportive of including spouses and a provision including spouses. And I think in terms of our path here, and I'm sure Raja can speak more to it, is that, as we've said, this has been a very long, difficult road to get any sort of guardrails or provisions in the House and to get House members to support it. What I think is very, very exciting about Raja's bill is that it does have bipartisan support. And so while the original text of the bill, you are correct, does not include the spousal provision, we are also in active conversations about being open to having floor vote amendments to include the spousal clause so that we can get folks on the record voting to support it. When we really started this out, I think we really, and Raja can speak to this, we really wanted to start as concrete as possible where we could get as much bipartisan support, because we need to reach that 218, that magic number to get anything passed. And I think just as increased public support has kind of brought this bill out from the darkness of it essentially being stuck, my hope is that increased public support and attention will help us get to a place where we can expand and also add an amendment with a spousal provision. But Raja, I don't know if you want to speak any more to that as well.
Sure, I think Alex did a great job of summarizing our thoughts on this, which is I think she and I and Joe and others would definitely entertain that kind of amendment, probably support it. But right now, I think that the spotlight is on members. Hundreds of members are trading stock, and the Stock Act is wholly inadequate to deal with the problem we have right now. As you expose in your excellent investigative work, 54 members of Congress violated the Stock Act in terms of not disclosing their trades. But for the hundreds who actually abided by the Stock Act and disclosed their trades, they created the appearance of insider trading. Basically, people assume that when these members say, come out of a COVID hearing and start to buy Pfizer stock, that somehow they knew something about COVID when they bought the Pfizer stock that the rest of the country does not know. And the same goes for the other securities that they buy and sell. You can't pull out your Ameritrade app, coming out of a classified briefing or a markup and think that the public is going to say, oh, you don't have access to non-public information when you made that trade. And so our primary concern is members of Congress, and that's why I think this is really commanding a lot of support across the aisle and in both chambers. But as Alex mentioned, we are more than willing to entertain that amendment. A lot of us would support it, but right now we want this thing to move. And right now, House leadership is prepared to do that. Jeff, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it's exactly a parallel situation in the Senate where both Senator Brown and I support including spouses. We are anxious to build the coalition, build the momentum. And I want to add one other piece about the conflicts. It isn't just what we hear in committee hearings or people visiting our offices, but all of us in the congressional world, we have to fundraise. And we're calling people around the country and they say, oh, by the way, our company is planning to do X, Y, Z. And it's really exciting because this is going to be a hell of a big product hit. And you kind of go, oh, really? Wow. And never should we be engaged in thinking, well, I'm going to trade a stock now as a result of what I just heard from somebody on a fundraising call. And never should we be writing legislation or voting on legislation where we're thinking about stocks we already own. So having people convert to a widely diversified fund is the right thing to do. And one of the provisions that we lay into it is you cannot hold a fund that is concentrated in a particular sector. I'm a big advocate of renewable energy, but I can't hold a quote diversified fund that's diversified only within renewable energy. That would be kind of the equivalent conflict as I'm working on legislation to tackle climate change. So we're really trying to create a fair avenue for members to have investment in capital enterprises, but through widely diversified funds.
Thank you so much. Just a reminder, if you want to ask a question, all you need to do is drop your name and outlet into the Q&A box. Up next, we have Katie O'Donnell from Politico. Katie, you should be unmuted now.
Hi, thank you guys so much for doing this. I just wanted to know, in terms of the actual mechanics of implementing this, what are some of the biggest difficulties you anticipate?
Who wants to take it? Maybe I'll talk a little bit about the mechanics, and then Alex and Jeff, you want to jump in. In terms of the mechanics of it, there's a transition or grace period that we built into the bill, which means that, let's say that the bill becomes law, then members have 6 months within which to, basically decide, are they going to liquidate their positions and sell their individual stock holdings, or are they going to hold them for the pendency of their time in office? Are they going to put them in blind trusts where those can be managed separately? And for those who are running for Congress and are not in Congress, they have to make the same decisions within 6 months of joining Congress. But we have this 6-month grace period so that people can make an orderly transition to a situation where, for instance, in my case, I'm invested in widely diversified mutual funds. And I think a lot of others are as well, but that's really the way to go. But there are other provisions that, enable them to make other decisions, but they have that 6-month transition period to do so.
There's really nothing that I need to add to that. We are taking feedback from folks all the time, and there is some complex details regarding trust that we have to understand well, and we'll have to figure those things out. But the general idea is pretty clear what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, likewise, I think Raja kind of covered the technical transition period and how we actually go about, how members actually go about ensuring that their assets are in accordance with the law, knock on wood when it becomes law. But yeah, I think he pretty much covered it.
Great. Next, we have Jonathan Weissman from the New York Times. Jonathan, you should be unmuted now.
Hi. So I have been seeing a lot of bills coming out. There's the Gillibrand Porter bill that they reintroduced just yesterday. The Spanberger-Roy bill in the House has huge bipartisan support. There's the Ossoff bill that he's putting forward with Mark Kelly. I mean, how are you going to get beyond the balkanization on this issue and get to a single bill? And what kind of talks are going on to actually get around a single bill that can move?
I can tackle that from the Senate side, which is we've already gotten together the authors to brainstorm over how we create a consolidated movement. There's differences of opinions on some of the details that we will continue to work our way through, as we also are taking feedback from other folks who haven't presented bills. We do have folks who are saying, well, we would like the opportunity when this is on the floor to expand it. For example, there's cases of judges who are ruling on corporate cases who own stock in the companies that they're ruling on. That's Chris Coons in the Senate has a bill related to that. Sherrod Brown has a bill that looks at conflicts of interest with the Fed and their ownership of individual stocks. There are colleagues such as Ben Sass who have broader bills that go on the Republican side that go beyond this into other areas. What we're trying to do as a group is make sure we don't lose sight of the central premise of the immediate effort. That is, we have a deeply poisonous problem of members trading in individual stocks while they're writing policy. And that's just unacceptable. We're voting on policy. And so while we're generating a broader conversation, and I'm seeing that as kind of, let's look at that on the side of showing how much interest and energy there is. Let's look at that as a positive. John Ossoff campaigned on this issue in Georgia. Elizabeth Warren campaigned on the issue of ethics reform in her presidential campaign, and they wanted to put forth their own marker that this matters to them. Now we're going to have to work to bring everybody into a common effort and make sure that this happens, and we don't get distracted or lost in the field of every possibility.
Alex, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think it's very, first of all, it's very encouraging that there's, I think, a lot of members now coming forward in both chambers with support, whether in co-sponsorship or with their own proposals. I do think that it's important to not lump all of these proposals together. Many of them do very different things. Some of them are just about putting all assets into a blind trust. They are distinct and different proposals. What I think is important about Representative Krishnamoorthi's bill and in our bill here is that it is, I believe, the only one in the House that explicitly bans members from trading individual stock. Some say, okay, put in a blind trust. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, but this one is very explicit in the prohibition of that. It also includes senior staff that also have access to those same security clearances or also sensitive information that members of Congress are also very, that also have access to. And so it's not just members, but also the folks who are making recommendations to their member on which way and providing counsel on which way to vote as well, to make sure that we're really, I think, protecting the public trust in our institutions. Now, that being said, I'm very happy that this has been gaining movement. There's been active conversations with leadership. Representative Krishnamoorthi put down this marker, several years ago. He was among one of the first members to do so. And since then, I think the amount of research, input and the sophistication and the development of this legislation really is, I think it sets a high waterline. But also, as Senator Merkley said, and as we've mentioned before, including these extra provisions is absolutely something that I believe there's an openness to. But in terms of what that core legislation is, Representative Krishnamoorthi's, I would say is I think the meatiest of them all. It has the most direct prohibition on trading prohibition of trading individual stock. And then we can absolutely, of course, include some of the best provisions and other ideas in that.
I just would add, oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe. No, Joe, go ahead.
I just would add, and I think Representative Ocasio-Cortez articulated this well. Obviously, there's the baseline policy distinction and the reality that this bill that Raja and I and Alex have introduced in the House and that Senator Merkley has been fighting for in the Senate for quite some time, has a bright line rule with respect to banning trades by members of Congress. But I also would say that this bill is the sort of chief vehicle, and that's in large part because it's been vetted. I mean, as Representative Ocasio-Cortez said, we introduced this bill over 3 years ago. It was the first and the only proposal really out there in the Senate and in the House that contemplated this type of reform. We're, of course, very heartened to see so many of our colleagues introducing measures as well, as Senator Merkley said, great champions for reform in both the House and the Senate on a bipartisan basis. And I think what you will see is a melding of the minds over the course of the next several months as we incorporate a variety of suggestions and various proposals that are included within those pieces of legislation. But our hope, as Representative Ocasio-Cortez said, in consultation with leadership and working with our allies in the House, would be that we could move this particular bill, the Ban Conflicted Trading Act, forward and use that as the primary vehicle.
I'll just round it out by saying all of us are open to amendments on this that incorporate the best ideas that other people have, but we need to move. We need to get some progress. We need to start. We got to stop talking and we got to start acting. And I think that's what the public wants right now. So that's why BCTA, I think, is the prime vehicle for doing that.
Thank you so much. We will take one last question. Dear Joe Walsh from NPR, you should be unmuted now.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you for doing this call. I wanted to ask, and I apologize, I got on a little late, so I don't know if you addressed Speaker Pelosi's position on this issue. Yesterday, she said she was open to moving on this, expected some movement pretty soon. And as you know, she's opposed the idea of doing this in the past, but she said she was looking at tightening fines for the Stock Act. If you are going to ban individual trading, you don't need those kind of disclosure rules. Members wouldn't actually be trading, so they wouldn't have to file all those disclosure forms. Do you have concerns that the speaker has not embraced a full ban on trading individual stocks? And as you talk about this process of melding various proposals, the speaker tends to be the person or the leader that organizes and synthesizes legislation to go to the floor. And with sort of her reluctance on this position, do you have concerns that that could stall efforts in the House?
Alex, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think, first of all, I think that the speaker's openness on this position is really a testament to the fact that public attention and pressure can move public policy from the bottom all the way to the top. And I applaud the speaker's openness and her willingness to listen to the caucus on this issue. Now, I believe again that in our conversations with leadership, we want to pursue a process that is as open and transparent as possible. And so that prospective changes can be through amendments that get public votes. And so, whether there are changes to the Stock Act, there is still there are many technical issues with the Stock Act, and the fact that this legislation would ban individual trades, that doesn't necessarily mean it repeals the Stock Act. And there are certain technical complications where we've heard instances of members who don't direct trades that, for one reason or another, they still experience some sort of interactions, whether it's a 529 education plan, a mutual index fund, et cetera. And so, I do think that that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we're pursuing a public process and that's transparent for the public to see. And I do believe that the speaker is very responsive and receptive to the caucus. And if the caucus comes to a point, I believe, the speaker has shown just a remarkable willingness to honor the conclusion that the caucus comes to on different issues. And so, there's plenty of votes and conclusions and developments I'm sure that she personally may not have agreed with in the past with legislation, but it happens for better or for worse sometimes because the votes are there. And I think that that's ultimately where we want to get to a point where the votes are there.
I actually think she is supportive of the gist of this proposal with regard to tightening fines or raising fines or changing the penalties. There's still going to be penalties associated with violating the BCTA. And so if she or others wish to change those penalties, definitely we want to hear about that. And certainly, as Alex said, there are still provisions of the Stock Act that would survive even with the BCTA in place. And I think that we want to make sure through technical clarifications and other amendments that we make it crystal clear how the two acts apply. And we want to make this as transparent and public as possible so that everyone can weigh in and we get the very best product we possibly can.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. That concludes today's press call. Please feel free to reach out to any of our offices if you have any additional questions, and we hope to talk to all of you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.